welcome to the EarthtonesGirl No Fear Sock Knitting Class online. My name is Denise and I am your teacher and host today. I am so excited to be here with you. You have no idea. There's going to be lots of giggling and squealing. If you are familiar with my podcast, if you've been a longtime viewer, you know that I get very enthusiastic and very passionate about my sock knitting, about my knitting and making in general. And I am beyond excited to be bringing you this class online. I posted on Wednesday. I made the announcement that it was finally happening, and oh my God, the excitement was just incredible. There have been a lot of new followers and a lot of new subscribers here on the channel. And the best way, let's just talk about this up front, the best way to keep track of all of the updates for this is to follow along with me on Instagram. That is where I will be posting that new videos are up on my YouTube channel, and also to subscribe here on the channel and turn on the notifications. There is a little bell. When you look at YouTube, there's a little bit bell next to the name of the podcast. If you click onto that, that will let you know, that will alert you every time a new video has been uploaded. So that is the best way to keep track of this. And once again, much to the dismay of many of you out there, and I will address that in just a bit, this class is free. I won't go into all of the reasons for that again, but I am so excited and hope that this reaches as many of you out there as possible. Please spread the word, pass this information along, let people know that this resource is out there now for them. This is going to be an ongoing sock knitting class here on YouTube. There will be an end to it eventually, but there's going to be a lot of information and a lot of techniques and things that I really want to share. So I don't actually have an end date at this point. The reason for that is, again, there's a lot of circumstance in life and things that get in the way. So I didn't want to put a time limit on it and then either run slightly short or run over. So, aside from also wanting to reach as many of you as possible with a free platform, it also freed me to have the flexibility. Again, I'm hoping that this will be a weekly class, videos to be uploaded and ready for you and available on Saturday mornings. So that way you have the weekend to snuggle up with your knitting and get some stitching done, have some quiet time, have some tea, just relax, and then, lead you into the upcoming work week. It also gives me time during the week to prepare the videos, get everything recorded, edited, and then uploaded for you in a comfortable amount of time. So enough of that. Let's just jump right in, you guys, because I don't want to talk about all those details. I want to talk sock knitting. Thank you all again so much for your enthusiasm. As you can see, I am bursting with excitement here. You should see the spread in front of me to cover. So this class is class number 1. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to name the classes, but it's class number 1. And what is covered in each class will be in the description box down below. That way you can, and I will put like a tiny little description in the name. So it's going to be like class 1 intro, class 2 casting on, things like that. So you'll know, it will sort of be a guide for you to follow along. That way, if you want to jump ahead to something further down the line, if you're joining us, also with this platform, you can jump in and out as it suits you. You can start with me from the beginning and we do it together. Or if you don't discover this, if it's a year from now and you're watching this, you can go back and rewatch, or you can skip through and find the videos that contain the lesson you are searching for, or that you need to improve or move on with your sock knitting. So today's episode, today's class 1, is going to be an intro. Now, for those of you, I did do a sock talk video series. There were only 2 episodes in that, and there's a lot of information in there that will be covered again here. But the format of this class is going to be shorter videos more frequently. That is much more sustainable for me, and I think it's a better way for you as the student to learn. You are not being bombarded with tons of information all at once. You're getting small snippets, and then you can move along. You've got a week to practice, you've got 2 weeks to practice, and don't feel like you have to keep up with the weekly classes. Like I said in the beginning, you can cast on, and you may be at the cast on cuff portion and just working on your leg for 2 weeks, for a month. It doesn't matter. This is not about speed. It's not about competition. It's not about comparison. We are all doing this at our own pace. I am presenting you with the information. You take that information and you move with it at your own pace. You knit at your own speed. You knit in a way that's comfortable for you. So this class is going to be, class number 1 is our intro class. So I'm going to be talking about what supplies you need. Again, the class is free. You just come on over, subscribe, and follow along. You don't have to do anything else. There's no formal sign up. There's no form to fill out. None of that. It's you just subscribe here, follow along on Instagram, and the information will be there for you whenever you want it. The other part of this that's really awesome is if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you feel like watching, you can, because I'll be asleep. So yes, let's get into it. We're going to cover all of the materials that you need today. We're going to talk about those materials in detail and getting yourself set up, because many of you have been knitting for a really long time, but you may not know where to start with your sock knitting. There's certain terms and words that you may hear bounced around and you're not quite sure how they apply to sock knitting. So we are going to cover those in as much detail as I can for you. And as always, please leave your questions and your comments down below, in the comment section down below. And what I will do now going forward, because this is the first episode, the first class, it doesn't really apply, but going forward, there will be a Q&A section at the end of each class where we will cover questions that I have then reviewed in the comment section down below. So that's how we're going to do that. So don't worry, your questions will be covered. It also gives me the chance to pool your questions, because many of you may be asking the same question. So it just makes sense to pool the questions and then answer them as they come in. So what we're going to cover today, but what we're going to cover today and what we're going to start with is yarn and needles. Let's start there. I've used many types of needles. I do have a favorite. What I suggest, before I even list the names, what I suggest for you is trying out different kinds of needles. In this class, we are going to be covering knitting with 2 circular needles and magic loop. Those are the 2 techniques that we're going to be covering here. In my experience, the yarn dictates quite a bit what kind of needle you want to use. And once I start talking about the yarn, I will explain that a little bit more. Right now, I have 2 go-to needles, or go-to brands that I use for my sock needles. I use Addi. Where are my needles? I use Addi Rockets, Addi Sock Rockets, Rockets or Sock Rockets. The names are interchangeable. It does not matter. The reason for the word rocket, if you see Addi Turbo, just a plain Addi Turbo, only that on the packaging, those points, the tips of those needles tend to be a lot duller. They're maybe not dull, but rounded, a little more rounded, which is not necessarily what you want for sock knitting. You want a point that will go into the stitches, because they are so small, that will go into the stitches with a lot more ease and speed, and make it much more comfortable for you. You're not going to be fighting with every stitch to get that rounder point into the stitch. So it's Addi Rockets or Sock Rockets. The other brand that I use, of course I'm not finding the one thing I didn't bring with me, no I did, are Hiya Sharps. So I have those right here. Hiya Sharps are the other needles that I use. And they come, many times they come with these little markers, open up, what do I want to use? Like bulb markers, removable. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm excited. I'm also a little bit nervous, so just bear with me for just a second. These removable markers, and I'm going to talk about markers in just a bit, because these are really key to use when you're first learning. Even when you've been knitting socks for a long time, I find them very, very helpful. So Addi, I use Hiya Sharps and Addi Rockets. These are the 2 needles. Now, you will be using 2 of those, so 2 24-inch needles when you are using your And I know you're all asking, so what length needle? You want to use 24-inch needles. If you have 32-inch and you've got two, go ahead and use them. All that's going to happen is the cable between the needles, this cable here is going to be a lot longer. I find this length to be very manageable. It's comfortable. It gives your hands enough flexibility to work, and the cable is not getting in your way. So we're going to be using two of these. As we start knitting, I will give you some tips to make sure that you are always connecting to the correct needle. And again, as we start knitting, you will understand what I mean by that. So you will be using two needles. For magic loop, you're going to be using one 40-inch needle. This is 40 inches. You can use a 32-inch, and when I use that number 32-inch, 40-inch, that inch measurement is referring to the cable length, to the length of this cable here holding the two needles together, okay? If you are knitting with a 32-inch needle, that's going to come to about here. Is that doable? Yes, it's definitely manageable. It's a little bit tighter. I think a 40-inch is a lot more comfortable, because generally what you're doing is you're going to have your hands in this position as you're knitting. So you're going to have these two loops hanging down on the side. These loops will then be shorter if you are using a 32-inch needle, and you don't have as much cable to work. I find a 40-inch needle, in my experience, to be a lot more comfortable. And you are just purchasing one needle if you are using Magic Loop. Some people do have issue with using two circular needles, because obviously then you're buying two needles, which is a little bit more costly and may not financially fit into your budget. You have the option then to use you have the option to use Magic Loop needles. The goal with whatever needle you decide is that this cable be very flexible. I know that you can buy circular needles. Susan Bates is a very popular brand that is more readily available in like the big box stores, Michael's, Joann's, etc. They are very good needles, absolutely great needles to use. The only caution is that the cable on those needles tends to be a lot stiffer. I don't know the type of plastic that's used. I have absolutely no idea, but it definitely makes for a stiffer cable. There are ways to soften the cable by dipping it in hot water and everything. If you're willing to do that, great. But to me, having quality tools makes the experience so much more enjoyable. If you're constantly wrestling with your needle and trying to dip it in water to relax it, that's just frustrating for you. And you may give up on your sock knitting because you're frustrated, but not necessarily with the process of sock knitting, but with the tools that you're using. So I do recommend, again, everything that I mentioned will be in the description box down below for you. So Hiya Sharps and Addi Turbos are my go-to needles. For sock yarn, you're going to hear two terms. You're going to hear fingering weight yarn and sock yarn. Some people use those two terms interchangeably. I like to say sock yarn specifically. Why? Fingering weight yarn may or may not have nylon in it. There is definitely a shift or growing interest in using yarn, in particular sock yarn, that does not have nylon in it. That is great. I think it's absolutely fantastic. The addition of nylon makes your socks more machine washable. You can just throw them in the washing machine. I would not put them in the dryer, but throw them in the washing machine. You can wash them, pop them out, and just lay them flat to dry. If you do that with and usually if a yarn does not have nylon in it, it tends to be a non-superwash. If it's a superwash with no nylon, you can also machine wash them, lay them out flat to dry. If it is a non-superwash with no nylon, absolutely hand wash them, lay them out to dry. You can felt the wool when it's a non-superwash and no nylon. And felting, when you felt the wool, that means you lose the stitch definition. It will literally start to look like a piece of felt that you may get at the craft store. And that's not really what you want to have happen with your socks. And just an aside, I'm going to say it now that I remember, if you're gifting socks to anyone, which a lot of us do, if you're gifting socks, it really, really helps to put a little card in there or a little note, or just let them know verbally how to launder their socks. That is a really, really big help, because you've put time and energy into knitting these, and you don't want them accidentally felted or shrunk or whatever. So as a new sock knitter, I would focus right now, and I'm not deterring from anyone, it's a personal preference, but as a beginner, I would recommend using yarn specifically made and dyed for sock knitting. Sock yarn, and that comes in, there's so many options, it's mind-blowing how many options you have for sock yarn. You have commercially dyed yarns that are made on a much larger scale. I have some of those to show you in a minute. You have independently dyed yarn. So you have commercially dyed and independently dyed yarn. Again, it's a budget thing. The commercially dyed yarn tends to be a little less expensive, has a lower price point. The hand-dyed yarns and the independent dyers, they have a slightly higher price point. It is whatever works for you. I have heard many knitters say, many budding and new sock knitters say that they're not ready yet for the expensive stuff, for the good stuff. They're not good enough for the good stuff. Don't say that again. Don't say that. Please don't say that again. You are good enough for the good stuff. You are spending, if it takes you 3 weeks to knit a pair of socks, it's the same 3 weeks that you're going to be spending with the good stuff or with the maybe not as aesthetically pleasing stuff. You work with what you can comfortably and what works within your budget. You work with what pleases you. What do you want to spend 3 weeks with that yarn in your hands or sitting on your lap? Does it bring you joy? I sound like Maria Kondo right now. but there's a point to that. There is definitely a message in that. Sock knitting is such a small canvas that the price point may be worth it. It may be worth it to you for a little splurge or saving up to purchase that. And because it's such a pleasurable experience, again, it's your tools. It's the quality of your tools that you are looking for. Now, here's a commercial yarn. I just happen to have this one in front of me. This you can purchase at Michael's or Joann's. It's called Patons Kroy, Kroy Sock, or just Kroy. This is Kroy Socks FX. The FX refers to the way it's dyed, to this sort of marled effect. You can also buy it without the FX. It's just a more solid yarn or a distinctly striping yarn. This yarn's amazing. It is amazing. I have knit with this yarn many times, many pairs of socks. It's what's lovingly referred to as workhorse yarn. It means it will hold up really well. You can dump this in the washing machine. I've even known people to accidentally throw this in the dryer and it comes out okay. I wouldn't take that chance, but it comes out okay. And this is available in 50-gram balls. You can, typically sock yarn is 50-gram balls, skeins, hanks, or you get 100 grams. The amount of yardage depends on the weight and blend of the yarn. So you're going to have, typically, again in sock yarn, you're going to have a 75% superwash merino with a 25% percentage of nylon. You can also get an 80-20. You can get what's called an MCN base, which is a merino cashmere nylon base, which is a lot softer. It's wonderful. It's buttery. It's fantastic. And the bases change. So you can get a 75-25 from one dyer, one independent dyer, and then you can get that same percentage base from another dyer, and it feels different. It is a very unspoken thing among the dyers. I know quite a few, and they do not talk about their bases or where they get them from. I do not even ask anymore because they do tend to be a little bit different. Play, have fun, explore, try different yarns, try tonals, try speckled yarns, try self-striping yarn. I've got this is Legacy Fiber Arts, and they will be having kits to go along with this class down the line, and we'll talk about that a little more in the next class. But this is Legacy Fiber Arts. This is a skein. Here is a skein. This is called a skein of yarn. You have a ball of yarn, and this could be referred to as more of a hank of yarn, or also a ball. So here, this does not need to be wound. You can find the end, which is usually kind of readily available and hanging out, and start your knitting. This in the ball, again, you find the end of your ball, which in this case is right where it's tied, and you start your knitting. This needs to be wound into a ball. How do you do that? I did have this question in the comments for the intro detail video for this class, and someone was asking, well, how do you wind the ball? Some of you may be saying, well, that's kind of, well, you just wind it, but you can wind this on a ball with a swift. It's usually an umbrella. Many people use an umbrella swift, which looks almost like an umbrella, but without the covering on it. You open this up, and I'm going to show you. So you take the ball band off. You take the band off. It is tied together right here. And this unwinds quite beautifully, and you see all of this gorgeousness. Okay, so here you go. You've got all of this. You cannot knit with it from this. You can try, but you will be very unhappy. Ask me how I know. I worked in a yarn shop for many, many years. This is almost impossible to knit from. Now, you have to wind this into some type of ball. I used to love winding these skeins into balls by hand. It takes a while, but it's almost like becoming familiar, almost like a slightly intimate process. I know that's a weird reference to make to yarn, but you understand. I mean, we all smell, God, this smells so good. We all smell our yarn and we rub it on our necks, but it's a very tactile, that's a better word. It's a very tactile experience. And I really enjoy, when time allows, I really do enjoy winding these by hand. And you can wind a ball by hand to look like this. Very time consuming, but so worth the effect. You can get these beautiful stripes of color, and it's just wonderful. This is Nomadic yarns, and this colorway is the Burrow. This is their Tweedy sock base, which is an 85% superwash blueface Leicester. That is the base. Many people use merino, but there's Corriedale, there is blueface Leicester, and those names refer to the breed of sheep that the yarn comes from. I am full of useless information, you guys. You're gonna be like, all right, enough. We don't need the history. But I think it helps you in making decisions about what you want. A lot of people tend to go to merino because that's what they're used to. That's what they're used to hearing or being referred to purchase. But blueface Leicester, Corriedale, again, very, very durable yarns, beautiful yarns to knit with. The stitch definition's amazing. So please, again, experiment with your knitting. But so anyway, this is an 85% superwash blueface Leicester with a 15% Donegal nep. And that refers to the little dots and sort of fluffs of yarn. That's the Donegal tweed. That is customarily a tweed. I will not bore you with the history of tweed yarn because you'll fall asleep. So, and I want you to stay with me. So anyway, back to this. When you open this up, as you see here, you have, this is where the yarn is tied together. Please make sure that you've got it completely separated and opened up. What can happen is as you're opening it, you may do this, okay? And think that you've got it all, and then you see right in here where it splits. If you try to put this on the winder like this, again, it's going to be a nightmare because you're constantly trying to figure this out and move the the strands. Please open it like this. Lay this on you have a tabletop swift. I will put a picture in here for you of that. I have one of those. I really like it. It's a little more comfortable and works better in my space than the umbrella swift, because the umbrella swift you have to clamp onto the edge of a table. That doesn't always work for me. I prefer a tabletop swift. Personal preference. One is not better than the other. I will lay this on the swift. I will set up my ball winder. You pop it in and you just wind it. If you choose to wind this by hand, you can drape it over your knees. I've got it right down here. Let me just move the camera so you can see. I have this draped over my knee, and I'll give it a little, like I'll spread my legs a little bit so that you've made the yarn taut. You've made it tight. you find the end, cut these off, cut these little strands off, find the end, and then you just unwind and wind it by hand. Just take a little bit off and just start comfortably winding the ball. You're going to start, you know what, I'm just going to wear this because why not? It's so instant neck warmer. So you find the ball, you hold it. I usually drape it over 2 fingers and just start winding. I pop it off my fingers and then just keep winding and turn and build on itself. And eventually you're going to have this ball in your hand. You just keep winding. Do not wind it tightly. The yarn has elasticity in it, and you don't, if you wind it super, super tight so that it's this tight pulling ball and you're taking the elasticity, you're keeping the yarn on the stretch and you're taking the elasticity out of the yarn, but you still want to wind a ball that doesn't fall apart. Just comfortably, literally about this pace, turn it, keep winding, turn it, keep winding. Just keep rotating the ball and you just want to keep winding. That is how you do it by hand. So you can drape it over to your knees if you have children, which is another good use for your children. Have them stand there if they're willing. Put them in front of the iPad, have them stand there with their arms like this or as wide apart as you need, wrap the yarn around, and they can just, if they lightly rock their hands, you can very comfortably unwrap the strands and start winding. You can also put this over the back of a chair. So you definitely want to wind your yarn. Another option is 50 gram skeins. And I didn't talk about, I did mention the 50 gram skeins in terms of these balls. You will traditionally need, not traditionally, but usually you need 2 of these to make a pair. I can get a pair, I'm a size 7.5. I was a 7 before my children. I'm a 7.5. And I can get a pair of socks with contrasting cuff, heels, and toes from 1 ball. The contrasting color skein usually comes in 20 grams. So that 20 to 50, what is that, 70 grams, is comfortably, I can get a pair of socks out of that with a little bit left over. Just a comfortable amount, so I'm not playing yarn chicken. Yarn chicken is when you're trying to see whether the yarn's gonna run out before you finish what you're knitting. So 2 of these for a pair. If your feet are a little bit larger, you can get away with 1 if you're using a contrasting. If you are not, then I would get 2 pairs because you do want to make sure that your dye lots match. I've seen there's really, really big discrepancies with dye lot, and I can't talk about that enough. I know people don't really talk about dye lots much anymore, but if you're buying yarn like this, or even buying from an independent dyer, whether they're on Instagram or elsewhere, buy 2 skeins when they have them on sale. Don't buy one now and then wait until their next update and buy another one. You can do that if you haven't already started your knitting. If you've already started, you're going to get a distinct jog in the color. It's hand dyed. The dye amounts, even though they may be following a recipe, could still be different. It's a lot. It's a lot of color, a dye lot. You definitely want to get 2. If you can purchase 2 in an update, I would strongly recommend doing that. Now, here is what a 50 gram skein. So you've got the 100 grams, which I had around my neck. Let me just reskein that for you so you can see what the comparison is. So how, if you open one of these, how do you reskein this? I've put my hands in between like this, just like that. 1 hand there, 1 hand there. And I'm going to keep my left hand steady and wind like this. And I'm going to wind this pretty tight until it starts to do that. Pull this down, wind it on itself. I'm going to keep turning. So my fingers get stuck. Going to keep turning, and then I'm going to tuck one end back into the other. It's not as neat as when it was originally done, but there you go. That is how you would re-tie the skein of yarn. So this is 100 grams, this one's 50. Again, if you have a contrasting, I keep dropping everything today, guys. If you have a contrasting, this is from Tiny Human Knits, and this colorway is Mint Hot Chocolate, which is also one of my favorite beverages. So this is Mint Hot Chocolate, and this is a contrasting 20 gram skein that she also made available. Not necessarily for this colorway, but I like these 2 together. Again, 20 grams, and this color is Uniform Gray, which I think is beautiful together. So one of these, this together will give you a pair of socks. If you are knitting for someone with a slightly larger foot, you may want to purchase two. And I do have another one right, okay, wait, right there. Oh, I always have this problem. I have another one right there just in case. If you've got leftover, you can make a pair of mittens, you can make baby socks, you can save your ends, save your scraps for scrappy socks. But here we go. So these are all of your options, guys, in terms of yarn. You've got all of these lovely options. Now, all of this back here, that is all sock yarn. I will not ever show anyone my entire stash because nobody wants to see that. In particular, my husband. So that is it for sock yarn. I think I have covered just about everything. Oh, and I did want to show you, if you are winding your yarn, so you're going to get the ball for the most part if you're winding by hand. If you wind on the Swift with a ball winder, it will look like this. It will turn into a pretty little cake of yarn that looks like this. And this is where I'm knitting right now. So let me just, yeah, it looks like that. So this is your cake. You have caked your yarn. Some dyers will do this for you. It is a service that they offer. So when you're ordering your yarn, some will ask if you'd like them to wind it for you, and this is usually what you will get. They may even ask you, do you want it as a cake or as a ball? I know there's a dyer that does that. I can't think of who off the top of my head, but some do offer that service for you. So this is a cake, and this is what I'm knitting up. We'll talk about this in a second. So I think I've covered everything with sock yarn. And I just want to wrap up by talking about, so those are your materials, basically. That's what you need. Let's talk about stitch markers. When you are working on your sock, please make sure that you have some of these. These little, can you see those? Oh, as it slides right off my hand. That's okay, it went somewhere. But make sure you've got these, guys. These little bulb removable stitch markers, and they open like this. See, they open like that. So you want to use these, and what I learned recently that people, well, not learned, but what I suggested recently that people found really helpful. Once we start knitting, you'll see how we're going to use those. We're going to be marking 4 places on our sock as we're going along. You're going to mark the front, the back, then you're going to mark, the first sock we're going to knit is we're going to be working on a shorty sock. I'll go into that in a second, but it's going to be a heel flap and gusset. That's the first heel we're going to cover. And you want to mark where your decrease point is, and you're going to have a marker on each side. So 4 markers to keep yourself situated, oriented, where you are on the sock as you go. They are very, very helpful. I do suggest having 2 colors. You can do this either way. You can have red for the front, green for the back, whatever combination of colors. If you want to have 2 greens for the front and the back, or 2 different shades of green, you can have different markers. The colors don't matter. It's just once we get started, you'll see in practice how they're going to be used, and that will be much more helpful for you. But I find color coding to be really, really helpful. Why am I saying to use removable markers? If you use markers like this, these super duper itty bitty, oh, how can I hold this so you can see? These really, really tiny little circle markers here, if you use these, it's very easy to do one of 2 things. Either to knit into this and you keep going, which will give you an extra stitch as you're knitting along, or you move it and kind of forget it's there. So your decreases are finished, you've moved it, and you keep going, and next thing you know, it's kind of stuck in your knitting. Again, ask me how I know that. The only way to get this tiny little circle off your knitting is to cut it. Is it cuttable? Yes, it's really, really hard. These are usually like a plastic coated metal. So you would need like a metal cutting tool to get this off. It's really not worth the risk of using these little guys. These do serve a purpose, absolutely, but again, just to keep things as simple and easy for you because you're starting, let's just put these to the side for now. You will have to cut this out of your knitting, and then you stand the chance of cutting your knitting. which we're not ready for yet. We will be doing that later, but not right now. Okay, so we've covered all of the basics. What I also recommend is a project bag for your work, for your making. I talked about this in the details video. I will be selling these. These will be available very, very soon. I will announce on Instagram when these bags are going to be available. This is my Sock Monkey on the go bag. It has a boxed bottom, so once you put your knitting in it, it will stand. You can also fold this down like this, and you have a little yarn bowl. Give me 1 second, and I will show you what this looks like. You also have a little yarn bowl. Isn't that adorable? And yep, there's my label, which I now realize is upside down. It's right side up when you're holding the bag properly, but for the sake of turning this into a little yarn bowl, it is upside down. But so these will be available for purchase very, very soon. This is going to be one way to donate to, and another way I'm compensating the cost and supporting the podcast and this class. Because again, I know that was a concern for many of you, and I do appreciate that. So these will be available. So have a project bag ready for your project. You can take it with you. Never leave home without your sock knitting. Sock knitting is your Amex. Never leave home without it. Keep a project in your car, keep a project in your purse, keep a project wherever. You never know when you will be stuck in traffic. You never know when you will be stuck on a line or in a waiting area somewhere. Pull out your knitting and just relax. It's a great way to get off your phone. I go to parent events at my kids' school, and I'm the only one sitting there knitting, and everybody else is glued to their phone. Just a little thing I like to throw in. Just, you can get your knitting done. All of us have very, very busy lifestyles. You can get your knitting done. Take it with you. Put it in something beautiful and attractive. I used to put my knitting in a Ziploc bag. I know many of us did before. If you've been knitting for a really long time, I've been knitting for a really long time, before there were project bags and before there were these beautiful, stylish, gorgeous, beautifully made bags. People just chuck their stuff in a Ziploc bag or in a plastic bag, even before Ziplocs. Throw it in a plastic bag or in a cloth bag. If you can't sew or don't have the means to purchase a bag, there's ways. If you cut a square piece of fabric, like maybe a 24 by 24, you can tie the opposite ends and then tie the other opposite ends. There's your bag. Okay, there's ways to do everything. Not everything has to cost you. So put all of your supplies in terms of notions. So what you want to have, here's my little notions purse. I love this so much. I purchased this at Nitty City. Free hugs. You know me in hugs if you've been watching my podcast for a while. So what I like to keep in my notions pouch are my removable markers. And the ones I showed you, these colored ones, these little colorful ones, are from Coco Knits. And the packaging, that's the top of the packaging right there. So, oh, here it is. It flew. So in my bag, I will keep a couple of those. I will have a tape measure. Where are my scissors? I keep a little pair of folding scissors. These you can purchase in bulk on Amazon, or you can purchase them individually. I purchased a bunch of them once. I purchased them in bulk because I keep little notions pouches in all of my project bags so that I'm not suddenly scrambling or have to stop to think to pack something. So keep one of these, a tape measure, your scissors. Hold on. You want to keep a darning needle, 1 or 2, in your bag also. These you can purchase. It's a very large-eyed tapestry needle. The point is very, here, if I hold it here, you can see against my shirt. The point is very dull, but still pointy enough that you can weave in your ends. So keep one of these available to weave in ends. Also, what I find I never leave home without is one of these little handy dandy tools. I love these so much. It has a little crochet hook on the top. I'll turn that around. Has a little crochet hook on the top and a point on the bottom. Now, this end can be used as a cable needle. The entire thing can be used as a cable needle. And then you've got the crochet hook to pick up a drop stitch, or to maneuver your stitches, whatever you need. Keep one of these in your bag, guys. These are by Susan Bates. You can also purchase these on Amazon. I will look them up for you and add links down below for you also. And what else do I keep in here? I keep one of these. Now, this little ring, you can buy these rings at Staples. I will add in the box down below. I don't have it right here in front of me. I will tell you the size, the diameter of this ring, and it opens like that and just snaps back into place. And I keep my markers on there. I keep progress keepers. I have this little one that's left over from October because I love candy corn. And I also have, this is a little progress keeper from Needles Up. This is from Legacy Fiber Arts. And this little guy I made myself. Hold on, let's not lose everybody. Let's close this back. And this little guy here, I made myself. This little sheepy guy can just hang out with me on my knitting and keep me company. So just keep some of these. You want to keep your removable markers, removable bulb markers on there, some progress keepers. Keep one of these. You can buy these, like a package of maybe 25 of these from Staples, and just slide your markers right on, and you pop everything into your little bag, and you're good to go. Again, this pouch was purchased at Nitty City. I've also seen these little bags. It's like a recycled plastic. I've also seen these at Whole Foods. So there you go. That covers it, you guys. So next class, what are we doing? How are we starting? We are starting our socks. This class is to get you prepared, talk about supplies. We are going to start our knitting. If you are anxious and you want to jump ahead, please feel free to do so. And then if you have questions going along, you can. What we will be doing, there will be a shorty sock pattern available for you on Ravelry that I am this close to finishing. So that will be available for you on Ravelry. You can purchase the pattern. It's very, very small fee, like $1 or $2 for the pattern. Again, these are the ways that I am financially supporting this class and the podcast. So you purchase your shorty pattern, you have all of your supplies, and we're going to cast on. Now, this is the yarn. Here's my cake. This is what I'm knitting up that I showed you earlier. I am working on the shorty sock. Okay, here it is. This is what we're going to make, you all. So now, what we're doing, we are going to, each class is going to focus on a different, initially, the basic, you're going to have your core five classes. We are going to cover the casting on and your cuff, your leg, your heel, the foot of the sock, and your toe. So what I have right now, and we're going to do a heel flap and gusset. That's the style heel. Covering my face. That is the style heel we are going to be covering in this class. And you will learn how to knit. You will get used to knitting in the round with whichever technique you've chosen. If you've never used any technique, this is your time to practice. And I do recommend practicing. Go around and around and around. If you've got enough yarn, you don't have to make a shorty. I'm starting us off with a shorty because it's a doable, achievable sock. Sometimes it feels a little daunting to start with a full-length sock. You can get all of the parts of the sock in a shorty. This one, you're going to have your cuff. You have a short leg. So this comes, where this sock rides is like just above your ankle bone. And here is our heel flap and gusset. This is a slip stitch heel. This is what we're going to be starting with. So that's what that looks like. Here is our heel turn and our gusset. This area of the sock in here is called the gusset. Cuff, leg, heel flap, heel turn. Here is your gusset. And I am just about finishing. Now your decreases are happening right here. And we're going to go into that because you want a left-leaning decrease and a right-leaning decrease. We're going to cover all of that in class number 2. And then once your decreases are done, you're just going to keep knitting straight, blissful stockinette down the foot. I will show you how to know when to start your toe, when to even start your heel if you're not necessarily using this pattern. And then we're going to work on our toe. And you do have options for your toe. There's a wedge toe, there's a round toe, there's different options for the round toe. I've also seen a spiral toe, and we're going to talk about all of that. So get ready. This pattern is what we're going to be doing. I will post a finished picture of this on my Instagram. This class is going to be here on YouTube, and there will be a lot of pictures and things like that just to keep you going during the week on my Instagram feed. So please bounce back and forth between the two. You will get the most out of following along in both areas. So here's my sock. And this is, oh my goodness, how could I forget? This is Legacy Fiber Hearts also. I know they have this yarn in stock right now, and this colorway is T for 2. Hold on, I'm saying that, but let's double check. Yes, this is T for 2. T for 2. T for 2. Okay. It is T for 2. And this is on their steel toes base, which is their 75% merino, 25% nylon base. I love it. It's smooth, it's buttery, it's very, very user-friendly, beginner-friendly. You will be very, very happy. Again, this colorway is T for 2. It's a beautiful pink. And since we're starting here on February 1st, it's a lovely little Valentine's colorway. Just saying. I like my socks to sort of match the season. Not always, but I might not necessarily knit a super dark striped yarn in June when it's beautiful outside and I want bright color. I may be knitting my rainbows. I tend to knit my rainbow socks later in the year. And we're going to also talk about really specialty sock yarns, because sometimes sock yarns are dyed to pattern and do different designs for you. So we'll talk about that as we go along. Welcome. No fear, you guys. We are knitting our socks fearlessly. No fear. There is nothing to be afraid of with sock knitting. I will take you through this step by step. I will hold your hand. I will try my best to answer all of your questions, or as many of your questions as I can get to. We are going to work together, okay? I want this to be a team effort. We are working together to create successful, happy, confident, fearless sock knitters. Are you guys with me? And these lovely little socks back here, these are also Legacy Fiber Arts. I know I'm going to get that question. These are Legacy Fiber Arts. This is their mini sock pattern. Here it is. Would I recommend, can you try this pattern? Absolutely. I added the little loop. This is not in the original pattern. You can make these for Christmas ornaments later, for baby socks, whatever you want, but I just wanted you to know what they are, because I'm sure someone will ask. Oh. And of course it dropped. I'll get that in a second. And these are sock blockers from Tribe Yarns. You can find them on Instagram as well, and I will link to them down below. Thank you so much for joining me today. If there's questions that you have, anything else you want me to talk about that I might not have covered here in the intro, please leave a question down below for me. Leave a comment. This is a Q&A. This is a big classroom. It's an international classroom that we have going on here, and I am going to do my best to bring as much information to you as possible. This first episode is a little bit long because there was a lot to cover and to get you started, but have all of your supplies ready. I will see you next week, and we will start our sock knitting. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you all very, very soon. Bye, everybody. Oh, I'm trying to use my little mechanical stopper here and it's not working. Let's try again. Bye, everyone.